All right. All right. No, don't. Go live, please. Pretty please. I am live. It just doesn't say I'm live on my freaking OBS. That's so cringe. I don't know why you would do that to me. I don't know why you would do that to me, OBS. I hate you. All right. Well, everyone, it's it's 10:39 or 10:40. Sorry, it's 10:41. I lied. It's actually later than I say. And we're gonna be streaming. And you're gonna all have to deal with it. So deal with it and watch my stream and enjoy the stream. I should have listened to music before I got on. That's okay. That's okay. It's fine. I can listen to music after. Let's see. And I think what I'm gonna do is we only have 21 pages left. See, look, watch. Until we reach the conclusion. You thought we were done with this book? No. Still, like, we still have like 30 to 20 pages after. No, it's actually only. Maybe we'll actually finish the book. Wait a second. Oh no, wait a second. Yeah, we might. Yeah, we might. We actually might. How many pages is this? It's like 230? I mean, sorry, 30 pages? Yeah, okay. We'll we'll frickin' see if all of you are good or something. I don't know. We'll we'll do it. We'll frickin' do it. Um okay. Well, okay. Well, yeah, with that out of the way. If not, we'll finish it next stream. So, either way, we're going to finish this in like one, maybe two streams. Maybe one, maybe an extra one. Maybe another one, depending on how quickly I get through all this. But 3 minutes in, no further delays. Let's start. The third power in the question of the state. If we are to give up the conveniences of modernism in the hope of salvation through capital S science, if we are to secularize public life by entrusting it to the little transcendence of collective experimenting, if we are to charge history with giving us tiny measured doses of the enlightenment that nature can no longer provide, we need a guarantee that can serve as a provisional absolute. This is what I call the power to follow up. A procedural power that must not be confused with the power to take into account and the power to put in order. We might call it the power to govern, if everyone agreed to use this expression to designate the relinquishment of all mastery. The art of governing is not the necessary arbitration of reason, the necessary arbitrariness of sovereignty. It is that to which one is obliged to have recourse when one can no longer benefit from any shortcut. When we have to compose the common world little by little, going from one trial to another along the invisible path of a painful learning curve, we need this third power that possesses not the qualities of strength, but rather those of weakness. We agree to have governors when no scale model is possible any longer, and when it is nonetheless necessary to scale down all the stakes to a simplified model, when there is no more mastery possible, and when masters are needed all the same. Very interesting. Um, if any of you are finished with my favorite book by Latour, Factish Gods, you will actually recognize a similar thing in what he talks about in Factish Gods. Um, um, Factishes are the things that which uh, that kind of like don't make it clear who's the master and who's being mastered. Uh, you kind of give up mastery, I guess, is kind of a similar thing. Very interesting. A trial is useful only provided that we get through it, that we document our results, that we use it to prepare the protocol for the next iteration. They make sure we have traced out a new critical path which will make it possible to learn more the next time. In modernism, as we know, there was never any real feedback, because the past was excluded for good and characterized as a useless archaism, as outdated irrationality, as subjectivity that had to be expelled to leave room for the indisputable objects of the common world, the only one we needed to know. What page were we on? 280, I think? We were on 280, right? Oh. Yeah, we were. No, we were. We can indeed measure the progressive disappearance of modernism as an interpretation of itself through the proliferation of colloquia, institutions, procedures concerning risk and the principle of precaution. This is one of the best indications of the presence in Europe, at least, of this new constitutions, whose dotted lines I am simply filling in with a black pencil. Barry, 2001. And then we go back to 200, but this time bottom of the page. Bottom of the page. Again, if anyone has any questions, any comments, any concerns, feel free to ask. I don't give a fuck. You can ask whatever you want. I'll try to answer the best I can. The metaphysics of nature prevented the slow exploration of experimental metaphysics. Unexpected consequences proliferated, nevertheless, and were always surprising, for they had no reasonable relationship with the matters of fact that set them off. It was thus possible to pile up attempts on the ruins of previous trials, without ever talking about trials or attempts or ruins. Each time modernization struck forever, indisputably, definitively, irreversibly, even if it meant going back later on to repair the damage it had done by means of a new objectivity, this one just as definitive. Within the narrow framework of modernism, the moderns never managed to profit even clumsily from experimentation. They bounced violently back and forth between absolute knowledge and unforeseen catastrophes, without managing to plug into history and its enigmatic events which had to be decoded blindly. 280. And then we're on 19. This is the great contribution of Ulrich Beck, to have been able to shift from modernization to second or reflexive modernization without getting drawn off course by the red herring of the postmoderns. And then to 201. Curiously, for people so obsessed with history, time passed in vain for the moderns. Bombarded with sciences and technologies, they never used these to become wiser, so they never managed to read in these events the meticulous exploration of their own collectives of humans and non-humans. If the historical experience we are trying to decipher has not only dismantled the old framework of nature with its dual scientific and political power, but also proposed countless institutions and procedures that await only a new gaze to become immediately obvious, armed from top to bottom, the same does not hold true for the power to follow up, which is still inextricably confused with the question of the state. Now, the state mixes together powers that have to be distinguished. Preoccupied with old regime politics, itself confused with capital S science, the state resembles the powers of divine right before the constituents of the 18th century began to redistribute them into separate functions. What is a state freed of the mad ambitions to substitute itself for politics, for the sciences, for economics, for morality? One that would devote itself exclusively to supplying assurances that the powers of taking into account and of putting in order are implemented according to due process. What is a state that would see itself neither as a collective, nor as the common world, nor as the end of history? What is a state that would no longer believe that it was endowed with the power of divine capital S science, a state finally capable of governing? And then bottom of page 280. This is also the essential problem taken up by Dewey in response to Lippmann's criticism. On this, see Mayer's forthcoming. Lippmann's solution, technocracy, having triumphed for half a century, we had to wait for its complete demise to fathom the profundity of Dewey's own solution. Little Dewey reference. I know that guy. I know a little bit about him. No, I don't want to highlight. I just want to scroll. But my mouse doesn't work exactly. I should acknowledge right away that I didn't have the same resources to make this power to follow up clearly apparent as I did for the two other powers defined in Chapter 4. History has not advanced far enough and the grip of modernism is still too strong. For the time being, I can only contrast the state of political science with the state of science policy. Very interesting. Okay, that's a very interesting distinction. 280. Oh no, sorry. We go to, wait. Is it it would be 250? It'd be 250, I think. And then we're on 202. Yeah. Where is it? Where is it? I don't know. Where's the state at? State. Okay, but where's science policy at? Science policy was one of the things also there. Okay. Okay. Sorry, this might take a second. Okay, we're just going to go to the beginning of this and we're going to type in science policy. We're going to do that. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to go to the beginning of this because I can't find it in the glossary. So we're just going to type in. That's not how you spell science policy. There we go. Please don't take me. Please don't take me. Please don't take me back to 201. Please don't do it. Okay. Okay, so... Okay, I guess he's going to explain it. Okay, we should actually... We're just going to look at his definition of the state. How about that? We'll just do that. Just one of the instances of a collective in the process of exploration. The entity that allows the exercise of the power to follow up. That has a monopoly on the designation of the enemy. That is the seat of the art of governing. That guarantees the quality of the collective experiment. A lot of things there. A lot of things there. 202. I'm not indulging in wordplay. The very expression political science expresses a new paralysis of public life by capital S science, a new injection of curare to stop the political body in its tracks. To all the disciplines that aspire to short-circuit the slow process of collective composition on the pretext of remedying its defects, political science adds a supplementary layer. By dint of rigorous, objective studies, public life would finally be purged of whatever momentum it has left. It would no longer have to compose the collective provisionally, in order to finally know what the social world is made of, what passions and interests move it. a scale model would be available. Conversely, the expression science policy, less well known, follows the path of political science in the other direction and gradually loosens the knot that the latter had tightened further. Science policy used to be mentioned in circles restricted up to now every time necessary to decide on research to be interrupted, prolonged, or initiated. Every time it was necessary to decide about the sterility or the other fruitfulness of experimental protocols. And then 281. See, for example, Colon 94, Colon Lardo 95. Okay, very helpful. Very helpful, Latour. Thank you. Not really. It was fine. They're probably really good papers. All these are probably really good papers. If the expression is generalized, it can thus bring out the contrast that interests us. We need not political science, but science policy. That is, a function that makes it possible to characterize the relative fruitfulness of collective experiments without it being monopolized right away by either scientists or politicians. And then we go back. 281. Here, we need to bring together the works of people such as Lakatos, or on the relative fruitfulness of research programs, and authors such as Habermas on the quality of consultative procedures. The juxtaposition seems strange. It is only because of the limits of the old constitution. Lakatos makes every possible effort to protect judgment on the sciences from human politics, which for him are arbitrary. Habermas, for his part, continually strives to protect human judgment from non-humans, confused with instrumental reason. However, in order to succeed, each one needs what the other preserves, sheltered in its trench. The scientific politics of the French Muscular Dystrophy Association, studied by Colon and his colleagues, is for me the most striking example of this new conjunction of morality and things in an original science policy. Okay, so you're telling me I want to read this paper really badly right now, but I can't because I'm supposed to be reading this. Also, why didn't you highlight it? You just underlined. Oh, that's why. Yeah, okay. Can you not? Hold on, wait. I wanted to highlight it. I didn't want to underline it. 2-2. It may seem strange to define the power to follow up as what has to remain independent of both politicians and scientists. Okay, back to 281. I'm not concerned here with the false quarrel between the state and the market, which presupposes an abandoned conception of the economy as infrastructure. To the traditional free market state that claims to liberate markets from the clumsy control of public power, I'm opposing here the state free of any preoccupation other than governing, because it had been cured of its intoxication with mastery and no longer hopes for any transcendence. Two. Is the state not the agency par excellence of the political? Would it not be better for its personnel to be steeped in the sciences? No, because the modernist regime did not know how to distinguish between political production and the dangerous support that capital S science offered it in bringing to it on a platter a nature or society that was already totalized. They used the term political to characterize the agitation of the slaves of the cave, defining their world through the clash of interests, identities, and passions. Nothing proves this state of the Leviathan can pass intact from one regime to another. It has compromised itself much too deeply under the name technocracy, with the worst possible mixtures of sciences and politics, managing to short-circuit both the work of the sciences and that of politics, monopolizing all the powers and all the competencies without managing to redistinguish them, plunging arbitration and arbitrariness into the same neglect of due process. Is it not the state that has dreamed of a science-based politics, a monster in whose name so many crimes have been committed? That's a good point. That's true. Not 218, 281. 24. Needless to say, it makes no difference whether this politics based on the indisputable laws of nature and history comes from the old Pravda or from the recent Wall Street Journal. Marxists from the left and Marxists from the right are twins. For both science, that is economics, should short-circuit politics. That's very interesting. Very interesting. Guess it makes sense, but it's very interesting. Very interesting phrasing. Are we on 2 or 3? Yeah, we are. One thing is certain. The collective is not the state. The very particular form of government that we are seeking to install will not find fully equipped offices ready to occupy without remodeling the older building of the Leviathan. And then back, and we go back. And then we go back. This point is the essential one in John Dewey's magnificent argument against all totalitarian or even simply totalizing definition of the state, which he too calls experimental. The state must always be rediscovered. Why? Precisely because nothing can be already totalized, and especially not the state. But a community as a whole involves not merely a variety of associative ties which hold persons together in diverse ways, but an organization of all elements by an integrated principle. And this is precisely what we are in search of. Why should there be anything of the nature of an all-inclusive and regulative unity? 38. Yes, the state is concerned with public life, but the public is precisely something whose mode of totalization is not known. If it were known, if actions could be controlled, we would indeed have no need, according to Dewey, for governors. When government comes on stage, it is because all mastery has failed. Dewey's minimal state thus has nothing to do with the free market state, which can be nothing more than a simple appendix to the economic sphere. Also a Carl Schmitt reference. I know that guy. Somebody at President Sunday. Somebody at President Sunday. That's his guy. Where? 25, okay. Indeed, from the standpoint of our Constitution, politics becomes as unrecognizable as the sciences. Moreover, neither politics nor the sciences are powers any longer, but solely skills put to work in a new way to stir up the collective as a whole and get it moving. The only recognized powers, according to the sketch in the preceding chapter, are those of taking into account and putting in order, in which all trades and professions share according to their calling. Now, this very principle of the separation of powers requires us to be highly suspicious of the encroachments of one function on the others, since each one, although necessary, aspires to hegemony. We need our checks and balances. A simple glance at the summary chart, box 4.1, shows us that none of the skills necessary for the activation of the collective in neither of the two powers in question, the power to take into account or the power to put in order, could be interested in the quality of the learning curve and concentrate exclusively on it. Is 4.1? 4.1 was in the previous chapter. I don't want to go to it. I know what it is. Actually, no, I will. I will go to it. What's the quickest way to do that? Maybe we go to 160. There we go. What one's this one? Yeah, it's this one. It's the one I showed you at the beginning of the last stream, I think. It's basically just listing out all of the powers. And then we have to fucking go to 402. So where's 402 at? So I can just like have a... Oh, and this is just this. Yeah, okay. 203. Left to itself, the upper house, especially if it is alert, will take into account everything that comes its way, without being at all concerned about the capacities of the other house to establish a hierarchy among the candidates presented. The lower house on its own will do its work of hierarchy and institution, simplifying life for itself by rejecting as definitely as possible the greatest possible number of beings, reducing them to non-existence. Moreover, how can a strict separation of powers between these two agencies be ensured? The lower house will always be tempted to prevent the upper house from becoming perplexed by raising as objections the harsh necessities of the common world, and the first assembly will drown the institutions of the second without mercy, while making it see that its established order does not do justice to the incommensurable worlds of the new arrivals. Who is going to take care of guaranteeing the quality of the investigations that we have listed and that are necessary to both houses? Who will archive the results little by little? The politicians, the moralists, the scientists, the economizers may traverse the various agencies in all directions, but nothing guarantees us that they will not content themselves with a single cycle, which amounts to interrupting the collection of the collective and to making the exclusions definitive, fixing the boundaries of the collective, naturalizing the distribution between inside and outside. We must then have at our disposal a strong procedural power, which politicians, scientists, economists, and moralists would share as they do in the other two, that would attach itself uniquely to the restarting the work of collection, as well as to judging the quality of learning, which amounts to adding a seventh task to the six functions of Chapter 4. To exercise this new power, we need a new skill that we did not present in the preceding chapter, one that can be called administration. In the state of law of nature, a state is required, and also law. Political philosophy did not anticipate that it would end up administering the sky, the climate, the sea, viruses, or wild animals. It had thought it could limit itself to subjects and their right to property. Capital S science would take care of the rest. Everything changes with the end of modernism, since the collective may have as its ambition bringing together the pluriverse. There is nothing in this feature that can astonish the other cultures, which are characterized precisely by a meticulous administration of the cosmos. Westerners, in this sense, only rejoin the common fate that for a while they thought they had escaped. This new competency amounts to being able to establish, owing to fragile bonds of writing and dossiers, what is called a paper trail. Bureaucrats are viewed with almost as much contempt as politicians. Who messaged me? I'm upset. I'm angry. I'm so angry. I'm angry. What is this? Stop it. Oh, it's Daedalus. Daedalus jump scare. Now where was I? Yeah. Okay. Bureaucrats are viewed with almost as contempt as politicians. Still, we do not see how to get along without them for the elaboration of a public life that would finally unfold according to due process, for the excellent reason that bureaucrats are masters of processes and forms. As long as we imagine with the old constitution that a society existed in nature, the stubborn maintenance of forms was being taken as a superfluous activity on the same basis as the slowness of the state of law in the eyes of a police state. Immediately and effortlessly, everyone was supposed to discover the obvious categories of good sense: humanity, nature, economics, society. Starting from the moment when one passes to an experimental metaphysics, the moment when the collective is defined no longer by a nature, by experimentation, it is going to be necessary to have access not to a global scenarization now, but to an experimental protocol. Task number 7. It is going to be necessary to keep track of trials, to record the results, to archive and preserve them. Administrations ensure the continuity of public life, as we all know. This continuity becomes even more indispensable when it is necessary to retain the entire set of hypotheses, the propositions that have been accepted and rejected that are gradually going to compose the common world. This is also important, by the way, for Latour's idea of how time works in this new sense. Time doesn't work by talking about an archaic past and a future. It instead works uh, by contrast to what has been accepted and rejected, what propositions have popped up within the collective, and what has been pushed outside, what has been pulled inside. And that's how this works, and so also becomes necessary for that, I assume. This competency will be found again, for example, in the function of perplexity. How can we detect new phenomena at the extreme limit of the sensitivity instruments without a meticulous accumulation of data over a very long time? No one has the ability to keep track of these except administrators. How can we proceed to comb and rake various incommensurable entities, number 3, if no one has archived the set of choices already made and carefully retained the more or less solemn engagement of their parties? I think number 3 is hierarchization, if I remember correctly. We can actually go. Frick, which page was it? I think it was 180. We're on. What page are we on right now? 205. We're just going to go to 180. We're going to find it so I can remember exactly what he's talking about. I'm pretty sure he's talking about hierarchization, though. No. Wait, yes! Yeah, hierarchy. Okay, hierarchy, institution, consultation. Yeah, okay, yeah. Seniorization is 6, and then 5 is separation of powers. Okay, yeah. How can we render irreversible decisions institution without the multiplication of procedures, votes, signatures, consensus building meetings that allow us to stabilize the collective provisionally? How can we ensure that the consultation takes place according to due process without a persistent verification of the qualifications that allow the various parties involved to participate in it? How effective would the ethics of discussion be without being followed up by bureaucratic processes? Administrators are going to have responsibility for distinguishing all the functions, number 5, separation of powers, and for coordinating the various professions. Yet they will not be able to ensure this coordination unless they can prevent themselves from shifting from forms to content. All the other callings are substantive. Administration alone is, if not proceduralist, at least procedure-driven. And then we go back to 281, right? This is one way to solve the opposition between procedural and substantive rationality. Contrary to what is claimed by Coulon and Lescumes, 2001, it is highly unlikely that agreement can be reached without going to the substance of the propositions at stake. But it remains true that the third power has to stick obsessively to procedure. I don't know what he argues in that paper. I'm sorry, guys. I can't give you the lore about that. I don't know. I know many things. I don't know that. Ask me another question. Ask me about Donna Haraway's new book, and then I'll still won't know. The new book by Donna Haraway I'm reading, and I still won't know. Once the skill of administration is added to those we had deployed in the preceding chapter, it becomes possible to define more precisely the learning curve on which the good articulation of the collective rests from now on, by asking the various calling to collaborate in a single function. Scientists know perfectly well how to characterize the learning curve. They call it the research fund. More than all the others, they are sensitive to the difference between cold, acquired capital S science on the one hand, and hot, risky, dynamic, competitive research on the other. Their flair will help us sense in which direction to lead the collective, rather that we add to it the remarkable flair of politicians for detecting the possible reversal of power relations in any situation. They too know how to recognize a subtle difference between static and dynamic situations, while finding in circumstances the opportunity to make them change. They know how to modify in this way the basis of the us they are charged with representing, as they keep to a steady course. But the collective will find itself even more alert if it can count on the economist's infallible nose for characterizing the health of a learning curve. They have multiplied the instruments, profit margins, balance sheets, economic indicators, bureaus of statistics, stock exchanges that allow them to designate the unstable dynamics to which they have entrusted all their treasures. The moralists have not been left behind, since they well know the moral qualification is always judged by movement, intention, direction, effort, and not only by acts or simple respect for formalism. Combining the skills of the various professions, we can thus say about the learning curve that it derives its virtue from being at once a productive research program, a dynamic political procedure, a prosperous economy, a scrupulous and uneasy morality, and a well-documented procedure. Good government is not a government that offers politics the senseless privilege of defining the common world, the place of all those whom politics assembles, but the power to follow up, which exploits the combined skills of administrators, scientists, politicians, economists, and moralists to choose the trackless path that goes from a less articulated collective to the better articulated next state. And then 5. Box 5.1. Complementing Box 4.1, the box recapitulates the contribution of the various skills from Chapter 4, the task of following through in order to characterize in a concerted fashion the virtue of the learning curve. Task number 7, power to follow through. Contribution of administrators, follow through in the protocol of experiments, failures, tests. Contribution of scientists, detection of a research front. Contribution of politicians, choice of opportunities that allow the reversal of power relation. Contribution of economists, unstable equilibrium that ensures movement. Contribution of moralists, quality of intention and directions. By seeking to install itself in comfort, political economy seems to tend toward a surprising result. Just as we have had to deliver the science from the sciences, the sciences from capital S science, and the collective from the social, we require a state that is no longer paralyzed by politics, by capital S science, or of course by economics. The liberal state is opposed to the liberated state, a state freed from all forms of naturalization. A new power, strong but limited strictly to the art of governing, has to succeed in preventing all the powers, all the partial competencies, from interrupting the exploration of the learning curve or from dictating its results in advance. All the scientific, moral, administrative, political, and economic virtues must converge to keep intact this power to follow up that turns out to be invested not with the general will engendered by the social contract, not with the destiny of the total recapitulation close to absolute mind, but with a simple and very modest learning compact. That alone is capable of trying to find out what the associations of humans and non-humans propose, and which goes beyond the actions controlled by each entity in unpredictable ways. If humans need government, it is not because they lack virtue, because they are not in control of their common actions, and their governors have still less control over them. All knowledge of the public good must in its turn also be the object of meticulous experimentation. The state ensures the comparison between matters of concern in and n+1. All right. I will be right back, guys. My coffee is in the fridge. I have to make sure it doesn't freeze so I can drink it. I'll be right back. I'll be right back. I'm going. I'm leaving. Bye, guys. I'm leaving you forever. I'm leaving. I'm back. I'm here. I had hot chocolate. What you guys didn't expect is that I also had coffee the entire time. I got you. I tricked you. I fooled you all. I had two drinks all along. Ah. If this definition appears too weak to those who believe they must be heirs of Louis the 14th, Rousseau, Danton, Hegel, Bismarck, or Lenin, they should recall the importance attached to the fragile envelope that separates the inside of the collective from the outside. I totally didn't almost completely fucking blank on Louis the on what XIV is in Roman numerals. I mean in like in numerals. If it is true that the state has the monopoly on on defining the enemy, the power to follow up can inherit that burdensome task. Right, the word enemy, as we have already seen, changes meaning. The term will no longer be used to designate human neighbors gathering troops along a border, nor will it be used to incriminate beings so unassimilable that one would have the right to deny them existence itself by limiting them once and for all as irrational. No, the enemy, human and non-human, is the one who was rejected but who will come back the next day to put the collective at risk. Today's enemy is tomorrow's ally. And this is where we get our Carl Schmitt reference. Everyone, Message Sunday. Message Sunday, everyone. He knows that guy. The Nomos of Bloodborne. He made a video about that. Which wasn't about Carl Schmitt. While Carl Schmitt offers the advantage of rejecting neutralization of politics by economics or technology, along with the advantage of clearly distinguishing an enemy from a criminal, he makes the error of completely forgetting non-humans and confusing politics in general, which is one of the functions, that of institution of exteriority, in which political skill plays a role. To make his work usable, I've had to undertake a risky genetic manipulation and blend Schmidt's enemy with Hans Jonas's sense of danger. It is easy to see that the exterior is not a nature, but an otherness capable of doing us harm and even of doing us in. The decision-making corresponds to only a seventh of the collective functions. A fake Carl Schmitt reference is what I'm hearing. Wow. Sunday would be so freaking pissed. What page was I on? I don't remember. Guys. I don't know what day it is. I don't remember things. Was I on 207? I was on 208. Wait, no, I was almost on 208. Wow, I'm doing horribly. In addition to the foreign wars and the civil wars of the past, there are internal wars that bring into conflict association of humans and non-humans whose number and threat were previously unknown. And then we go back, and we go to 282 now, right? Yeah. I see the current quarrel over genetically modified organisms as the first example. Wait a second, Pippa. Wait, doesn't this sound familiar? Hold on. The quarrel over genetically modified organisms. I feel like I've read about this somewhere in another book by someone named. I can't think of a funny name for her. But from a funny lady, a silly little lady. I see the current quarrel over genetically modified organisms as the first example of an yeah, of Haraway. Oh, you might not have been there. She recently in the book started talking about the war against genetically modified organisms. Of the internecine wars, technological, economic, juridical, organizational, and geopolitical. in short, worldwide in total after their fashion. Since the appeal to the sciences cannot in any sense calm the debate by making it a zero in on a common world. Even the Mad Cow episode is from the viewpoint less innovating, since one can still imagine retroactively that one should have been able to foresee the dangers, thanks to the sciences and technologies. With genetically modified organisms, the sciences and technologies are clearly participating in the combat as an additional source of uncertainty. The debate is important precisely because there is no clear-cut risk. What is at stake is clearly a cosmogram, a world in which one wants to live. Yeah, Haru was like, the people who are against genetically modified organisms are kind of weird, and some of the people who are in favor of genetically modified organisms are weird. And she's like, but I have this third option that has nothing to do with either of the two that's much cooler and better. I'm like, yeah, that's true. Sure, yeah, I agree with that. The state is no longer solely concerned with preparing for war abroad and presenting civil war. It must also be on a continuous alert for this other war, which does not yet have a name, although it has always been raging, by which a collective in the process of exploration opposes anything that challenges its reason for being, that threatens it with annihilation, and with which it must nevertheless come to terms. Depending on the power to follow up, a given collective will thus find itself integrated into two quite different regimes. It will be defined either as a fortress under assault by barbarians, or else as a collective surrounded by excluded entities that are on the path toward appeal. In the first case, the enemies will have shifted into insignificance, into inarticulatedness, and will have become barbarians in the etymological sense, producing inaudible gibberish. In the second case, the enemies will be combated as future allies and will remain capable of worrying the entire collective with the mere thought of their provisional exclusion. There are no barbarians other than those who believe that they have definitively found the words to define themselves. The Logos is not a clear and distinct speech that would be opposed to the incomprehensible babblings of the others, but the speech impediment that is catching its breath, starting over. In other words, that is singing its words through a trial. Yep, that's what the Logos is. I know about that. If we borrow Levi Strauss's powerful definition, use the term barbarians to designate those who believe that they are being assailed by barbarians. Conversely, we can call civilized those whose collective is surrounded by enemies. Very funny. This is Latour does a similar thing in Factish Gods. What is an anti-fetishist? Someone who believes everyone else is a fetishist. Someone who believes others are fetishists. What is a modern? Someone who believes that others believe. Very interesting thing he does in Factish Gods. Very weird too. In one case, we have contamination by barbarianism. In the other, contamination by civilization. The barbarians see barbarians everywhere. The civilized beings see civilized beings everywhere. According to these two figures of speech, the danger changes meaning. Whereas external barbarians threaten internal barbarians of destruction, internal civilized beings threaten external civilized beings threaten internal civilized beings with new requirements. We might thus say about the power to follow up that it defends civilization, provided that we no longer define civilization as modernism did by position on the ladder of progress. There is no more ladder and no more progress, but instead by the civility with which a collective allows itself to be disturbed by those who it has nevertheless explicitly rejected. The state defends independence without without an autonomy within. Without an autonomy. I can't make sense of the sentence, but I feel like I know what it means. But I can't decipher it in my head. It feels like this is wrong. Is not civilization in the reception of aliens a fairly precise way of retaining from the old state the essence of its vocations? Once it has been liberated from its pretensions to becoming the sole rational agents of history, the only totalizer? Okay. You might actually have to stop here for today, because I'm a little bit. Oh, okay, okay, okay. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. I don't know why I was confused by that. We can see. Maybe we'll go for another one. Let's see. How long? Yeah, okay. We'll stop here. We're gonna stop here. Okay. We'll get to the conclusion either later tonight or tomorrow. I might stream again. I'm probably gonna be up all night. So yay! But I'm gonna be in Sunday's chat if anyone wants to join me. This will be the end of the stream today. And by today, I mean for right now, and I'll probably stream later if I'm not too tired and finish this. Even if none of you join, which none of you probably will, because of this. But I will probably be streaming later. We'll fucking do it. We might do it. We might do it. But if not, I'll try to finish this tomorrow night. But yeah, all right. See you all. I'll be in Sunday chat.